And now turning to the Middle East, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says that a strike on Iran will show the world the might of the Jewish state. Speaking to fighter pilots at a secret air base, Gallant said Iran's dreams of defeating Israel would soon be destroyed. The threat to Iran comes right after Secretary Blinken left Israel during his trip. Blinken failed to convince Israeli leadership to de-escalate tensions. Washington fears that an Israeli strike prior to the U.S. presidential election would severely disrupt the race. Here's the latest on Israel's threats to Iran.
This is Israel's sharp end of the sword. The F-15 and the F-35 stealth jets, bought from its biggest ally, the United States. These jets are capable of striking targets thousands of kilometers away. The F-35 has an operational edge because it is one of the hardest to detect. And Israel wants to put its stealth jet to test. US intel leaked online this week suggests that Israeli jets have been training to strike Iran. It will be in retaliation to Iran's missiles attack on October 1. Efforts from the United States and France to restrict Israel from retaliating, fearing an escalation, have failed. Despite making his 11th trip to Israel in a year, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been unable to convince Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Blinken was sent back without a ceasefire deal or any assurances from Israel that it would not escalate against Iran. In fact, right after Blinken left Tel Aviv, this is what Israel's defense minister had to say.
The Air Force is a key element in this matter, and anyone who tries to harm us will be harmed. This is also true for Iran. After we attack in Iran, they will understand both in Israel and in other places what your preparation process includes and the arrangements and your readiness. And we have a very high confidence in your abilities, personally in each of you, as a group and as a squadron, and of course, full confidence in the Israeli army.
Gallant says Israel's strike on Iran will show the world their might. This means that an Israeli strike is coming. And they've hinted that it will happen before November 5th. But Washington fears that this would severely impact the US election. So the two presidential candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, are playing it safe. Trump says that Kamala Harris will destroy Israel and that the Biden administration is the Jewish state's enemy.
Did you hear this? You know, they leaked all the information about the way that Israel's going to fight and how they're going to fight and where they're going to go. And somebody, who did that? Can you imagine somebody doing that? That's the enemy. I guess that maybe is the enemy from within, as I talk about. We have an enemy from within. They hate to talk about it. But could you imagine? Could you imagine? So we just can't stand for this incompetence anymore. We are an incompetently run country.
Kamala Harris has urged Israel to negotiate a ceasefire at multiple occasions. But as Israel prepares for a strike, what is it that Iran is doing? Tehran has gone on a diplomatic blitz. President Masoud Pezeshkian was in Russia attending the BRICS summit. There he met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and urged New Delhi to broker a truce. The Iranian president also met Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Tensions in the Middle East vis-a-vis Israel was the primary agenda. And the Iranian president has gotten assurances from both Putin and Xi that Tehran will not be abandoned. Similarly, Iran's foreign minister met counterparts from Turkey and Kuwait to keep regional allies abreast about rising tensions. Iran continues to brace for an Israeli response, and Israel is keeping up the suspense. Its forces are preparing for a much larger escalation in the region.
You have the right to participate in the war on the 7 fronts. And on all these fronts, the IDF is present and the Air Force is present. Gaza, Lebanon, Judea and Samaria, Syria, Iraq, Yemen and Iran.
The strike on Iran could come any time now. Tehran has vowed to respond with its full might. The United States watches from the sidelines as it promises to defend Israel if Tehran retaliates. The ball is now in Israel's court. And it looks like Prime Minister Netanyahu is waiting for the right time to respond to Iran.
President Volodymyr Zelensky could get military help from South Korea. Seoul could consider supplying weapons if North Korean troops join the war with Russia. Our international correspondent Megumi Lin joins us now. She is live on the ground right now in Kyiv. And Megumi, what conditions need to be in place for Seoul, South Korea, to send those weapons to Ukraine?
Oh, that's right. South Korean President Yoon today said that Seoul could review its ban on providing arms to Ukraine if indeed North Korean troops do deploy and fight alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. Now, South Korea is one of the top arms exporters in the world, but its law prohibits it from exporting arms to a country at war or any conflict zone. But as you said, South Korea has been saying that it could consider changing this legislation and start helping arm Ukraine. But it is unclear whether or not this decision would actually move forward or how easily or quickly this can be done. But what is clear is that South Korea is really considering this development, taking this development very seriously. And it is also really observing the developments of both Pyongyang and Moscow's deepening military ties. Now, South Korea's Yonhap news agency also said that Seoul is considering sending personnel to Ukraine to help Ukraine monitor the movement of North Korean troops. So we are seeing indeed greater possible involvement of South Korea in Ukraine.
You know, it's fascinating, Megumi, because we're learning more and more each day about what is happening. What is Russia and North Korea doing to deepen their military ties?
Well, it is clear that Russia and North Korea have indeed been strengthening their military ties, their military cooperation, especially over the past couple of months. Russian President Vladimir Putin made a rare visit to Pyongyang in June of this year, where he signed a mutual defense treaty with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And this treaty basically stipulates that in the event of aggression, there will be mutual assistance will be provided to the country that is facing that aggression. Now, Russian lawmakers today voted unanimously to ratify that treaty in the lower house of parliament, and we're likely going to be seeing this treaty approved in the upper house of parliament. As we know, both houses act as rubber stamps for the Kremlin. Now, both the U.S. and Ukraine has been saying that Pyongyang has already been supplying Moscow with ballistic missiles and millions of artillery shells, which both Russia and North Korea has denied. But now we're seeing even greater cooperation between the two countries, especially after yesterday's confirmation from the Pentagon that they do have evidence that North Korean troops are indeed in Russia receiving training. Now, so far, we've seen the strongest response so far from U.S. Intelligence Committee Chair Michael Turner. He's calling on the Biden administration to make clear that Pyongyang joining Russia's invasion would be considered a red line for the United States. And he's saying that if North Korean troops do invade Ukraine's sovereign territory, the U.S. needs to seriously consider taking direct military action against North Korean troops.
Megumi, final question before I let you go. The population in Kyiv is well educated. Has it trickled down to the streets that there is the possibility of North Korean soldiers on Ukrainian soil fighting on the side of Russia?
That's right. People here, of course, concerned. I mean, if we look at the battlefield situation in the east of Ukraine, especially, we are seeing Russian forces advancing. We're seeing Ukrainian troops severely outnumbered by Russian forces. We're also seeing a serious struggle by the Ukrainian government to mobilize more men to join the fight. And of course, men here are very concerned that they would also have to be thrown into the fight soon because, of course, Ukrainian troops are struggling, and Russian forces almost every other day are capturing more villages, more settlements. So, of course, this is definitely a concerning development for ordinary Ukrainians as well.
Our international correspondent Megumi Lim for us on the scene in Kyiv. Megumi,
NATO is warning that North Korea sending troops to fight against Ukraine would be a significant escalation. Reports by South Korea's spy agencies say more than 1,000 soldiers could be on their way. Our Asia correspondent Stash Butler reports.
North Korea's military carries out a recent recruitment drive, as reports suggest hundreds of its troops could soon fight on the other side of the world. South Korea says Pyongyang has sent 1,500 Special Forces soldiers to Russia, and it warns they're likely to join Moscow's war in Ukraine.
The government is calling for immediate withdrawal of the North Korean troops, and if the current military collusion between North Korea and Russia continues, we will not tolerate but act firmly with the international community.
Seoul now says it's considering supplying Kyiv with weapons. Ukraine's Western partners have warned against intervention by North Korea, also known as the DPRK.
If they would be sending troops to Ukraine, that would mark a significant escalation.
If true, this marks a dangerous and highly concerning development and an obvious deepening of the DPRK-Russia military relationship.
Ukraine has urged its allies not to hide from this challenge, as it suggests up to 12,000 North Korean troops could be on their way. Russia has declined to comment.
North Korea, the Korean People's Democratic Republic, is our close neighbour, our partner. We're developing our relations in all spheres.
2.5 years since the invasion began, Ukraine and Russia have relied on allies' weapons and money to sustain their fight. But boots on the ground by a foreign nation's troops would be taking a step further than most. Stash Butler, Sky News, Taipei.
The latest from the 16th BRICS summit in Kazan in Russia. On the final day of the summit, the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Chinese President Xi Jinping have sounded alarm over the escalating tensions in West Asia. At the summit, the Russian President Vladimir Putin warned that the West Asia is in fact on the verge of an all-out war.
The military action that started a year ago in Gaza has now spread to Lebanon. Other countries in the region are also affected. The level of confrontation between Israel and Iran has sharply risen. This is all reminiscent of a chain reaction and puts the whole Middle East on the verge of full-scale war.
On the other hand, China's President Xi Jinping said that the world still faces serious challenges to its peaceful development and has called for a total ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and to stop the spread of war in Lebanon.
全球南方国家共同迈向现代化，是世界历史上一件大事，也是人类文明进程中史无前例的壮举。同时，世界和平和发展仍面临。
The 36 countries are participating in the BRICS Outreach Plus format on the final day of the summit in Russia's Kazan. This comes a day after the BRICS leaders adopted the Kazan Summit Declaration, which summarized the summit's outcome and Russia's term as BRICS chair. At the BRICS Plus summit, India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said that the world order is changing. International law must be respected and there must be zero tolerance for terrorism.
Addressing conflicts and tensions effectively is a particular need of the day. Prime Minister Modi has emphasized that this is not an era of war. Disputes and differences must be settled by dialogue and diplomacy. Agreements, once reached, must be scrupulously respected. International law should be adhered to without exception, and there should be zero tolerance for terrorism.
On the sidelines of the BRICS summit, the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President Xi Jinping took the very first step towards thawing the bilateral ties which have been frozen for almost 5 years now. The two leaders underlined that maintaining peace on the border should be their priority. The meeting, of course, came after India and China announced a patrolling arrangement along the line of actual control. So this, of course, is the latest in terms of what's been unfolding at the BRICS Plus summit. And this, remember, is an important one which has been underscored in terms of how the international world order is changing. And WION's Siddhant Sibal is, of course, joining us with more updates from Kazan in Russia. Siddhant, the fact that the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, was, of course, present as part of this BRICS Plus. Tell us, what is the significance of it?
Well, the fact that the UNSG was also present at the BRICS Plus meet shows that when it comes to the grouping and the host, Russia's priority, it is an inclusive meeting that took place earlier today, the BRICS Plus meeting. Remember that yesterday, while the BRICS member met, today not only the BRICS members but invited countries, the guest countries, Russia's neighbors, and of course the head of bodies like the United Nations are also present. Now, two significant aspects. First, of course, the presence of the Palestinian president here in Kazan, invited by the Russian president. In fact, both the leaders will be having a bilateral, and most of the leaders, in fact, all of the leaders during their statements earlier today mentioned about the worsening situation in West Asia. The second, of course, the presence of the UNSG, who was recently debarred from entering Israel, declared persona non grata by the Israeli foreign minister on the social media post. Though it is not legally binding in the country, that is a political rhetoric by Israel. Now, both these developments will be closely watched in Israel, even as Russia will be seen as an important stakeholder when it comes to West Asia crisis. How Russia negotiates in terms of various stakeholders is something that will be closely watched. We know that not only Russia but other leaders as well. The Iranian president is also present here in Kazan. Iran is a member of the BRICS grouping, and there was a meeting between the Iranian president and the Indian Prime Minister where the situation in West Asia was one of the key focus areas. The Indian External Affairs Minister also during his address mentioned about the worsening situation in West Asia and backed the two-state solution.
And also very quickly, Siddhant, if you can weigh in on this, ever since the breakout of the Russia-Ukraine war and subsequently the war that we are seeing in West Asia, the West, led by the United States of America, has been trying very hard to try and in many ways try and isolate countries such as Russia and Iran. But the BRICS summit that we've just witnessed in Kazan points out that the world order is quite clearly changing.
Let me quote from what the Indian External Affairs Minister said, that the BRICS is a statement of a new geopolitical order. He said this earlier today at the BRICS Plus meeting, and that's basically sums up the mood on the ground here in Kazan as to how there is emergence of a non-Western world order, and Russia has taken a major lead. If you look at what happened here in Kazan, there was focus on several issues, whether it is the expansion of the grouping, whether it is the non-Western payments mechanism that has been the key focus area, with countries calling for trading in the national currencies, or whether it's a message from Moscow to the West that it is not isolated. It has a number of friends in the global south and two major friends in Asia, both China and Russia. The fact that there were several pictures of the Russian president flanked by the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping, these pictures speak much more than, of course, was spoken publicly here in Kazan. And this is something that is closely being observed in Western capitals, including in Washington.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Siddhant Sibal, for joining us and getting us those updates then.